2022年4月、イーロン・マスク氏が旧ツイッターを440億ドルで買収しました。複数の内部のキーパーソンに綿密に取材をされ、本書では買収の舞台裏について書かれています。どのような経緯でこの本をお書きになったのでしょうか。
I was a fan of Elon Musk's. Before I wrote this book, I actually thought he was, considered one of the smartest people in the world. People would, compare him to Da Vinci. He was doing electric cars, he was doing space. And then when he took over Twitter, things kind of seemed to spiral out of control. The reason I wrote the book was, I think, because I was such a fan of his and I wanted to know what had happened and why this kind of transformation had gone on, that I believed a much worse Elon Musk came out of it, and so it actually started with an email I got from a Hollywood producer. So a lot of my books turn into movies, and I have a lot of connections in Hollywood. And a producer had called me and basically said, this would make a great movie or television show. Would you be interested in getting involved? And so through him, I started to sort of reach out. He had a bunch of connections at Twitter, and pretty much everyone who was getting fired at the time would find their way to me. So my sources in the beginning were mostly anybody Elon fired would just email me or go find me on Twitter, actually. And I started interviewing everybody who started to leave the company. And that's where it began. And then I tried to get into sort of Elon's inner circle. I reached out to Elon. He didn't really want to talk to me, but some of his inner circle did. And so I got in with some of the people who really are very close to him, have worked with him for a long time. And so that was kind of where it started, but mainly it was people at Twitter, high level people, people who were very high up, who worked in the room with him, until they, ended up leaving or getting fired or whatever. So had a lot of sources for this one. Yeah, I mean, it's a hard and complicated question, because there's a lot of different faces to Elon Musk. On the one hand, he is brilliant. I would say that he is brilliant. I also think his greatest power or ability is to get other people to do something they didn't think they could do. So often he can walk into a room full of engineers and they tell him something is impossible. And he says, it's possible, you're going to do it. And if you don't do it, you're all going to be fired. And by the next day, they all agree that they can do it. And he's done this over and over again at Tesla, at SpaceX. And, he tried to do it at Twitter. So his greatest power is getting other people to do something really good. It's not really him. He's not the best coder in the world or computer person. He's not an engineer like the engineers he works with. He's not, it's not his ability necessarily, but his ability to get other people to do something. He is very thin-skinned. So something about Elon that's very important to know is that he can get insulted very easily. He can get upset very easily. He can get very emotional and to the point where, he enters this dark place where he locks himself in a room where he gets very upset. And so it's volatile. He can change very quickly. I mean, what we've seen happen with him and Trump, falling apart. It was so obvious that was going to happen because you have two very thin-skinned people who can't take criticism, who need to be loved. That's the other thing about Elon. He needs people to like him. And yet he made himself into this villain for half of the country here, which was very difficult for him. I think personally, I think he was surprised and shocked when people didn't like him. And I think that was a new experience for him and he didn't handle it well. So, I would say he's an incredible leader when, he's doing something that we agree with. He got people to do things at Tesla and SpaceX that I don't think anybody else could have done. So there's a good side to him and a bad side to him. I think it's a mix. I like Jack Dorsey a lot. I think that he is a thinker, a philosopher. He's much less concerned about winning or money or power or any of that stuff that I think you see with Elon. I think he built Twitter basically because he thought it was going to be great and cool and life changing and world changing. And he didn't like the business side of it. You know, he was not a businessman. He got betrayed. He got essentially kicked out of his own company. The board went against him, and so I think as a person, I think he's a genius. I think he's much more sort of, I don't know if it's Buddhist or what sort of, specifically it is, but I think he's definitely spiritual, and I think he sees things in that light. So he's trying to make this spiritually good thing, and it doesn't matter to him that it became this multi-billion-dollar thing. So he's a guy I really think would be happy having no money. I think he'd be happy wandering the world in barefoot and growing his beard long and just being a thinker on living up in a mountain somewhere. But he inadvertently created this incredible sort of company and then had to figure out how to run it. So people love him. I mean, when you talk to people who work with him, they just adore him and they almost worship him, but he was never really a good manager. And so, that was a hard role for him to sort of run this company. Yeah, I think that you're absolutely right. I think Dorsey saw Elon as a way of saving his company from the evil board of directors, from the people who were ruining it. And he really is the reason Elon took it over in some states. He actually reached out to Elon. He wanted Elon to come because Elon was the only person who had the money and essentially the ability to take over a company and turn it private like that. So really, it was Dorsey's fault in a way that Elon got involved. And I think they do have a lot of respect for each other. I also think that Dorsey did not like the direction that Elon went in some ways. I don't think Dorsey was thrilled with a lot of what ended up happening. I don't know today what he thinks of it, but I don't think he expected Elon to sort of get so emotionally involved and to do the things that he did, that sort of brought it down. But I think there is a lot of mutual respect. They both have similar views about, say, crypto, about what technology can do and sort of saving the world from some certain things. But I also think that Elon is much more of a he needs to win, he needs to fight, and even when things aren't necessarily for the betterment of everyone around him, if he feels like he's dug in, he fights back, and I think Dorsey doesn't look at things that way. So I do think that they are friends, but I'm not sure they're as close now as they were before. Yeah, Twitter had a lot of problems. First of all, it was a bloated company. It had way too many employees. I would interview people who would say that they didn't really go to work. They nobody was showing up. People were, working at home but not really working. There were so many different projects going on. Nobody had any, the management was all over the place. Nobody knew who was doing what. They had a problem with figuring out their censorship system. I mean, they had a committee that was attempting to sort of do the right thing and find a way to keep control of the bad elements that rise up in the social media. But they were way too harsh. They were throwing out people with conservative voices that were, they would say misinformation, but some of them weren't misinformation. Some of them were just different ideas. There was also a lot of government fingers in the pot. There was a lot of sort of back and forth between different government agencies that wanted specific people thrown off or wanted to control certain narratives, and there just wasn't a clear sort of censorship system. It was an attempt to do something good, but I just think it went way too far. I mean, when they trying to decide whether they should cut out that New York Post article, which was about Hunter Biden, and I think that was an error. Things like that made it seem very sort of, liberal. It made it seem very sort of on one side of the political spectrum, which, listen, all the social media sites ended up doing something one side or the other side. It was very hard to be right down the middle, but I think that their system wasn't great. But the main problem it had really was it wasn't losing money to the extent that it ended up losing money after Elon took over. But it was bloated. It was spending way too much money on too many employees. I mean, they had this incredible ice cream bar and you'd go into Twitter and the it was the most, it was being in like a fancy restaurant, they had all of this stuff, the smoothie machine or whatever. They had, you could get pictures of Jack Dorsey in your coffee. It was just so high end. People loved working there, but it was just massive expense for no reason. And so those were the main issues. Yeah, so Yoel, Roth was basically the head of Twitter's safety and it's essentially its censorship board. Basically, he was the head of the committee whose goal was to keep it safe there and keep it healthy, keep people from saying things that were racist or negative. And he ran it very well. He had a team of people who would, discuss these things. It was very carefully thought out. And when Elon took over, he was one of the people that Elon kept there. Elon made him very powerful there. Elon liked him. They got along, and he was seen as one of the people from the old Twitter that was going to stay with Twitter for the long run. But what ended up happening is he decided he couldn't handle what Elon was doing anymore. When Elon got much more tyrannical, I guess, and was throwing people off Twitter, was making decisions that Yoel, didn't agree with, and ruined the whole blue check system, all of this kind of stuff. Yoel left. And when he left, he also wrote an article basically attacking Elon, basically saying the reasons that he left. And Elon felt very betrayed. And Elon needs a cult around him. He needs people to love him. And when people turn on him, he takes it very personally. And I think to him, this was a betrayal of someone that he had put in power and had kept in power. And so he went after Yoel. I mean, he really went after him to the point where Yoel felt unsafe, had to, run out of his house in the middle of the night, was getting death threats, had to pretty much disappear and has been low profile ever since. And so I think, when you turn against Elon, it can be very scary because Elon has a lot of power and he has a lot of people who follow him. And so, yeah, Yoel was a particular person who he felt betrayed by. There are certain things that he did that I think were, um, the most egregious. I think in the old days, the blue check system, I think, though it had a lot of flaws to it, it created a place where you could find trusted voices for whatever you were interested in. Because to have a blue check, you had to be some sort of expert or celebrity or have some reason why you would be getting some sort of special thing. Now, it was somewhat unfair. It was somewhat, people could buy their way in. There were issues with it. But on the whole, when you saw someone with a blue check, you knew who they were. And if they were an expert in some, field, you could go to them for information. I think the thing that Twitter lost was its usefulness as a place for true news. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I look at the world today and with what's happening in the war in Iran, and in the old days, you could go on Twitter and you would see really, basically, you could know that you were seeing people who understood what was happening, were telling the truth, were people who had, you knew who they were. They weren't anonymous. They were professors. They were, people in politics, and you would read their tweets, and you would maybe get a level of information that today you go on there and it's just crazy. I mean, you don't know what you're looking at is real or what's not real. The people who have blue checks now are mostly voices you don't want to hear from, right? And the other problem I think is that the old Twitter really tried to control things like racism and anti-Semitism and sexism. It made a real effort at making it a place where you didn't feel like you were just going to hear a lot of horribleness. And now you go on Twitter and you just can't avoid it. It's everywhere. It's just a cesspool of really negative, racist, and anti-Semitic comments all day long. And I get that what Elon wanted was a place where there's free speech. But the reality is, if there are not guardrails, it's just a mess. I mean, I have a teenage kid, a teenage son. He doesn't have free speech at the dinner table because if you gave free speech to a teenager, it would really be awful. And everyone knows that. And the reality is a lot of people on Twitter are immature, are teenagers, are people who just don't care. And if you equate all of the speech basically by making everyone have the chance to be able to say whatever they want, it sounds great in theory, but in practice, it just becomes a cesspool of racism and anti-Semitism. And that's just problematic. I mean, you go on Twitter because you want to get the news, you want to know what's happening in the war, and instead you just get a whole bunch of people yelling at each other, and making fun of things, and it's just not as useful anymore. It's really not useful. I mean, people forget, but like when Twitter was at its best, if there was a hurricane, for instance, you would have people going on Twitter saying, "Help, I'm on top of this building. Can someone save me?" You would have the police going on saying, "We're going to be in this area right now." I mean, it was very useful in times of trouble. And now it's really not. I mean, now it's more about arguing with people and yelling at people, and it can be entertaining. It is entertaining, no question. It's entertaining, but it's not useful. And I think that to me is the biggest, the saddest part, because I did think it was a very useful thing back then. It also shifted very right wing, which it's fine if you want to have a right wing site, but again, when it had more of a balance to it, I think it was again more interesting. People felt more comfortable saying whatever they wanted to say without getting attacked. Now you're going to get attacked if you say a certain thing. And I think that makes it less of a place of free speech than it was before in a lot of ways. But those are two of the things. I mean, there are a lot of reasons why I think old Twitter were better than new Twitter. But there are things about new Twitter that are good too. I think the AI system there is pretty interesting, and what he's doing with Grok is very interesting. I think video, exploded. He made video a big part of Twitter. I think long form tweets is great. I think that's a good thing. So there are good things that came about, for sure. But overall, I think we're missing what it was. It really was this kind of village, city on a hill, or whatever you want to call it, where smart people went and had smart conversations. I don't think you see a lot of that anymore. I'm hopeful and optimistic that we're going to see Elon going back to the old Elon, which is this inventor, this guy who creates these incredible companies, who wants to get us to Mars, sustainable energy. I mean, the robo taxis he's making, I mean, that could be phenomenal. And his Optimus Prime robot, whatever he calls it, I mean, that's really important stuff. If he makes robots work, on a mass scale, I mean, that can be life changing. That's the good Elon. That's the Elon I want to see going forwards. And I just hope he stays out of politics. I really hope, because I personally, listen, I'm not a political person. I'm not going to get into the whole craziness of American politics, but it was just so, I think he meant well. I think he wanted to do good things. He wanted to cut the budget. It just was very hard to watch, because he was burning things down the way he did at Twitter. He comes in and he breaks everything. And in engineering, there's the whole theory of you break something, right, and then make it better. Or you blow something up and then you realize what you can do to make it not blow up. But when you do that in government, it's messing with people's lives, it's messing with people's livelihoods, it's causing all these unattended effects that I think are very dangerous. So, listen, everyone has the right to be involved with whatever political party they want to be involved with, but I think he has such outsized power and so much money that it's so much better for the world when he stays out of politics and just, sticks with what he's, known for and what he's great at. I personally think he will step away from Twitter. He will be involved less and less and less, because I think that's better, for everyone. So I wouldn't be surprised if a few months from now we see an announcement where he's taking leave of it. That's my guess. But we'll see. We sold this to Netflix. So we're trying to make a television show out of Breaking Twitter right now.
Oh, nice.
And we have a script, and we're just waiting for the cast to figure out who's going to play Elon. So it should be very
When
cool.
do you think it's gonna be on the air?
On the air would take if everything went well, we could shoot the show in the fall. So it would be sometime next year.